Hello. Am I on the mic properly? You can hear me? Needs to be closer? Okay. There, how's that? How about if we aim it directly at my mouth? And I heard there is. This is important. Pardon me. And I will try not to get any on the book because this is actually Dwayne's display copy. So, I'm going to be reading tonight from Karen Memory, which is my most recent solo novel. And this is the first time I'm reading this book in Seattle. And that's singularly appropriate because I started writing it when I was teaching Clarion West in 2009. It wasn't published until 2015, but that's the way these things go sometimes. And I figured I would read. This book is set in a slightly fictionalized hybrid of Seattle and San Francisco in 1872, which is called Rapid City in the book. And I'm sure some of you will recognize the place that my protagonist is about to describe. You will also notice that she's very food motivated, very food motivated. The Bayview Market is two lies in just one name. Rapid City has a sound, not a bay, though what the dictionary difference is, I couldn't be the one to tell you. And you can't see the water from it anyhow on account of the shipworks dry docks. But it is just about hard enough by to smell the sea, and it's about my favorite place on earth, barring my own private bedroom. It's a long redwood building the size of those dry docks, up on stilts and with the doors guarded by wooden stairways on account of maybe flooding. What with where it sits, redwood stands up to a soaking anyway. And it was built long before the street raising plan went into effect. Now it's just 8 feet up the road instead of 30, even if the road isn't quite finished yet. You used to be able to row to it when it flooded. Now there's talk of putting in stone steps, the better for folk to fall down them and split their heads when the granite slicks up in the wintertime. Still, it's full one end to the other with market stalls. There's hothouse flowers in January, and oranges from China, and alligator pears from Mexico, and the freshest seafood you ever tasted in your life. Scallops as big as your hand, that you cut and eat like a fillet steak. Oysters by the gross and by the dozen. Plain briny honest fare for whores and tradesmen alike. Agate red salmon and agate green lobsters that turn a whole different, brighter red when you boil them. Saffron, cinnamon, nutmeg, peppercorns. Sea salt in great, soft, sticky flakes. Cheese from as far away as Vermont and France. Blackberry wine and good brown local ale. Fresh baked bread, coffee beans like green pearls, tea that's come from as far away as Priya did. Anything you have ever eaten or wanted to eat, basically, and a slew of other things besides. Baskets, cloth, Singer sewing machines right out of the Sears catalog. Even made-up clothes for the prospectors heading north, who didn't bring nobody to sew a thing for them. Really sew, I mean, though I suppose most wives know a bit about the other kind of sewing, too. I could spend a week walking the sawdust-strewn planks of that place, nibbling samples of sardines and candied salmon. So it's a good thing Connie sent me with a list, because otherwise I might wind up bewildered and wandering the aisles until I wasted away to a haint. There are more than a few stories that the Bayview is haunted. Mostly I think they're jokes. Mostly. Miss Francina and me bought 3 kinds of bread, which I stuffed into a net bag, and 2 kinds of cake. She took charge of those. We also split a small apple pie as a snack. Most of the other fruit was only good as preserves by now, though you could buy some ready canned in glass jars as pie filling. But the end of the apple harvest was still coming in, and the pie tasted like paradise with ginger sugar sprinkled on top. So I guess I got my pie anyway. And you know, it turned out I did need it after all. We got 10 pounds of onions, half white and half yellow, and arranged with a butcher to deliver 50 pounds of fresh beef and venison, and similar provisioning from a fishmonger. The potatoes would be delivered too. The greengrocer had some of those Chinese oranges with the real soft skins, and I filled up a bag with them, and another bag with Brussels sprouts. They're just fancy cabbage, but the Johns will pay extra for them, and I like cabbage well enough. The eggs and the milk come to the house on delivery, so we didn't have to worry about those. By the time I'd sent Miss Francina back to our hired cart for the 3rd time to drop off packages, I was feeling quite pleased with myself. Miss Francina is nothing but good qualities, but none of those good qualities is the patience to cook well or do the kind of picking over potatoes for green spots it takes to handle the marketing. I'm good at it. It's no fussier in detail than grooming horses, and I was feeling pretty smug about my good work and Connie's trust as I shouldered a net bag of onions with one hand and picked over mushrooms in a bin with the other. I think I was even humming to myself. Some fashionable tune that Pollywog, who is opera-struck, had been playing on the parlor baby grand while the professor wasn't looking. I'd never take so little care now, but the hand on my wrist caught me by complete surprise. Of course, I flatter myself that my enemies, and now I know I got enemies, which weren't a word I would have used in those days, wouldn't do anything so careless now neither. They'll have learned a little respect. But as I said, I wasn't expecting nobody to grab me just then. I guess I was young yet, not too smart. I just stared at that hand on my wrist in shock. It was big, scarred across the back, curls of coarse, tawny hair sprouting between the knuckles. Exactly the sort of hand you might expect to grab you unexpectedly, except for the woman's dainty gold ring on one pinky. I followed the broad bones of the wrist up to the elbow and the rolled up calico sleeve. Home sewn, it looked like. Somebody cared enough about this fellow to hem his clothes with care. As for me, I didn't care much for him at all. He was squeezing my arm, something fearful. My eyes snapped up to his face. He wasn't as tall as his hand predicted, but he was even broader. He had bad teeth and good skin, dark blonde hair greased into ringlets, a red silk kerchief inside his collar tied in a fancy knot. I didn't know for sure he worked for Peter Bantle. He's the antagonist, if you haven't figured that out yet. But let's say I could guess. "You're one of that damnable woman's tarts," he said. He had a pleasant, light voice. I thought Pollywog would have called it a tenor. He sounded more surprised than mean. "Well, you better come along with old Bill now." Nobody nearby seemed to notice that he was grabbing me. Or if they noticed, they didn't care, even though I wasn't tarted up just then. I was wearing my plain blue muslin country dress and a carriage coat for marketing, and no paint. Amazing what people can fail to see when it's a man doing it to a woman, even a respectable-looking woman. I hit him across the kisser with 10 pounds of onions, and he let go of my arm. The net bag held, to my surprise. A couple of his teeth were less sturdy, as I surmised from the way he staggered back, clutching at his mouth, and then worked his jaw doubled over, spat red, my stomach lurched, and grimaced. Around us, people withdrew in a circle, some watching, some walking hastily away. Behind me, the greengrocer pulled the boxes of mushrooms out of harm's way. Bill blinked tears from his eyes, then fastened his gaze on me. "Bitch," he snarled. Why they never think of anything cleverer, I will never know. When he lifted his hand up again, this time there was a fighting knife glittering in it. But by then, I had the umbrella in my right hand, the wrist still red and burning from knocking his clenched hand loose. A knife sharper, but an umbrella has reach, and mine had a pretty good steel ferrule at the tip. He was a lunge and slash fighter, and he had the weight and reach on me, but Bruce memory taught me to brawl when he taught me to shoot and to ride, and when Bill stepped up to his right to dodge my umbrella swat and swiped at me again, I surprised him by not jumping back, but instead spanking him across the hand with the onions. It worked. His hand went up, and I jabbed him in the breadbasket with the umbrella. I might have gigged him like a frog, except the ferrule stuck on one of his canvas braces, so it just made him oof like a mule when you deflate her for saddling. He went skidding backwards, buying me a couple of seconds, but the Spanish notch on the back of the bowie snagged in the net, and the onions ripped. Onions bounced everywhere. I heard myself panting, watching the onions roll. A quick glance left and right didn't show me anything else I could use to follow the knife, and the umbrella wouldn't stand up to more than 1 or 2 cuts. There was no sign of Miss Francina, and even if she heard the cries going up and came in a run, she'd hit the press of people going the other way. It'd take her too long to get back to me. With the knife out, the crowd was pulling away further, and still nobody stepped in to help me. I could try to jump the greengrocer stand, but a bustle and petticoats weren't designed for acrobatics. Bill looked at the torn bag in my hand and smiled, showing me the teeth I'd busted. A little spit-thin blood dripped down his chin. At least he shaved. I think I would have puked for sure if it was trickling through stubble. I wasn't stronger, and quicker only helped me so far. I suppose I just couldn't get lucky enough for Bill to trip on the onions and break his full neck. If I was going to live through this, or get out of it without getting dragged to Peter Bantle's house and from there God knows what might happen, I'd have to be smarter. As Bill stepped in, careful of his footing between the rolling skunk eggs, damn him to 16 different hells, 1 for each piece. I looked him in the eyes and pinned a smile to my face like I planned to applique it there. So, I panted. Each couple of words came out between a gasp. I'm betting Peter Bantle, don't know, one of his toughs goes about waving knives at women in the Bayview. Somebody in the crowd heard me. I knowed by the gasp I heard that wasn't my own. I was just afraid that Bill might be too head up to realize he was doing something stupid, or too head up to stop doing it even if he noticed. I never had to find out. Somebody pushed out of the crowd and stepped between us. It weren't Miss Francina, neither. I got a confused impression of a man's big shoulders, black hair and ringlets on a black coat, black hat, tan deerskin range gloves, black boots chased with silver thread. Whoever he was built on the scale suggested by Bill's hands. I couldn't see over his shoulder. But even from the back, I recognized the gesture he made as he lifted his left hand to his lapel and ran the thumb under it, flaunting a star that must be on his breast. He flipped the wing of his duster back, and I saw his right hand cross his body and hover over the holster tied down to his left thigh with a rawhide string. There was another holster on his right thigh, but the butts of his guns faced the wrong way, forward. My dad would have blanched to see that crossbody draw, but some people said it was faster. U.S. Deputy Marshal, he said. A big voice to go with a big man, and I'd put him in Texas or Arkansas. If I were you, mister, I'd put that knife away. Bill drew himself up, but he didn't cringe. Pity, it'd make my life easier if he was cowardly as well as stupid. His voice dripped scorn and disbelief as he sneered, Marshal? He lowered the knife, and the gun didn't come out. Bill said, this stomach broke my teeth. His voice came out hissy and bad, on breaths flecked with red spit. I ducked back behind the marshal so I wouldn't have to see. It'd probably impress my rescuer less if I shot the cat all over his shoes. Is that so? Said the marshal. He didn't look back at me. This little thing? There aren't a lot of men who can get away with calling me a little thing. But I could have walked under this one's arm if he held it out straight, and he was about twice as broad as me. She tried to stab me with that sword stick. Miss, the marshal asked, I'd like to hear your side of the story. Well, I don't know when the last time was that a man called me miss when I wasn't buying a chicken from him. More or less, I allowed, except that when I stuck him with my umbrella, he was trying to cut me. And when I hit him in the face with my bag of onions, he was trying to kidnap me. Huh, said the marshal. He had a good voice with that flat Arkansas accent laid over it. Guess it goes to prove what they say. There's two sides to every story. He paused, tipped his head under his hat, and said, Mister, I guess you'd like to get to a dentist. I peeked around the marshal's shoulder. Bantle's man's mouth did a funny thing that must have hurt like hell over what was left of his teeth. My mama had bad teeth. They killed her when I was 9, and that's why Dad pretty much raised me on as his own as a Mustang Campbellian. And I had an idea of how much pain Bantle's man must be in. His eyes were glassy with it, his skin sweat-soaked and pallid now that the fury was draining out of him. His jaw worked and he swallowed. Spit and blood, I imagined. Thinking about it made me want to up my chuck. I swallowed too. The marshal, poor Karen is not really good with blood. This is a bad book for her to be in. The marshal's gloved hand alighted on the butt of his gun. Bill's eyes followed the soft movement, and when he looked up again, you could tell all the fight had puddled in his boots. Who gives a damn Negro a badge, he asked no one in particular, and faded back into the crowd. I blinked. The marshal turned sideways, towering over me, but keeping one eye on Bill's retreating back. Once the crowd hid Bill, the marshal's hand came off his gun, and he ducked down a little to talk to me more level-like so I could see more than the line of his chin. He said, I reckon my reputation don't precede me. He was a stone handsome man, and I say that even though for me humping with men is just how I earn my crust. His cheeks and chin were scraped clean around a thick, well-trimmed mustache, and his brown eyes shone. His face was also brown and shiny as a toasted coffee berry, and he smelled like fresh coffee, too. I thought he might have been about 40 years old. He weren't 45. Ma'am, he said. His duster's black canvas strained over his shoulders when he tipped his hat. U.S. Deputy Marshal Bass Reeves, at your service. And then Miss Francina burst through the crowd in a flurry of lace and wrath. She nearly took Deputy Marshal Reeves' head off before I got between them, and we had some explaining to do while we picked the onions up.